everybody, I'm Professor Acilon Batista from FPA, and I'm here to present the data film or to talk about what positive social impacts can academic practice bring to people in social vulnerability. We try to answer this question by presenting data film, which is a community engaged research from our university, aiming to achieve social innovation to the civic media movements that are coming from the Terra Firme district, which is this one I'm showing here on this picture. Well, it's a neighborhood which emerged from occupations in the 80s and 90s in flood areas inside the center of the city. Its residents have learned to deal with all kinds of challenges like site floods, occupational stilts, conflicts with authorities, and high crime rates. However, after years of incremental landfill, the neighborhood was consolidated and connected to the city, what allowed them to access better public and private services like the telecommunication network. Say that we consider as social innovation the recognition and support from public authorities for innovative citizen practice, the recognition of cultural diversity, and the empowerment of people formerly socially excluded. That we see all of these characteristics on the civic media networks we found in Terra Firme. The civic media networks, using Zuckerman's definition, they are forms of civic engagement using digital media as a core component and adopting post-citizen participatory civic model. Since the Arab Spring and the Kitchen Revolution in 2008, there have been movements like it all around the world, and according to Castells, it's necessary a fire start to ignite such movements, like the self-immolation of Mohamed Bouazizi that you can see here in the first picture. He put fire on himself, and it started all the protests that we saw on the Arab Spring. In the Terra Firme district, it all started in 2014 after a militia attack which took 11 lives in only one night. Well, militias are a crime organization composed mainly of police officers and former colleagues controlling the outskirts. However, then, after this specific event from 2014, the people living in these outskirts, especially having the youth as protagonists, they saw in digital media a secure instrument to articulate actions like protests and content production, and at the same time to safeguard their lives. Here we can see the Terra Firme, which was the first civic media group. It's starting after this event, and they created this audiovisual production that's named It Could Have Been You, which tries to give face for the victims since 1994. Well, here are other cultural-based civic media movements that we have in the neighborhood. Although Boi Marronzinho is before 2014, it only started to work as a civic media movement after this event in 2014. About the methodology, we started the project using the theory of change to base an action plan. The classical theory of change comprises inputs. Let me show you here. Activities, outputs, and it leads us to some outcomes. In data film, the inputs were the meeting apps we have with the community and the civic media movements, like we have on this first picture here. In these meetups, we use design think strategies to decide what would be the outputs that we wanted and what would be the outcomes that we also had in mind on that time. It leads us to the activities that we can see here, and it made us to work inside a framework that we call the double diamond, which has 4 stages. The first one is discover, then define, develop, and delete. The discover stage is where the empathy happens, and it made us to use during the activities lots of workshops, like workshop for script, project management, photography, entrepreneurship, filmmaking, but we also needed to make a lot of research, and we had some interviews with old community members. We researched newspapers archives, and we had one hackathon, and social cartography was carried out within the community, right? Here we have our action plan. It's almost the same, at least the same input for all activities and outputs. However, the outcomes, we believe that it would be the same for all the outputs we had in mind. Here are some of the pictures from the activities. This number 4 here is one of the meetups. The number 1, number 2 are a hackathon and a workshop. The number 3 and 5 concerns the field work of the social cartography, and the number 6 was a digital campaign we carry out with the Ame Tukunduba, which is one of the civic media movements we had there. Well, I'd like to introduce the two main outputs, even though there were more outputs during the process. The first one is the web documentary Nós na Tela, which means we on the screen. It was a series of 10 short documentaries produced for internet and web platforms. It involved 12 students with scholarships working in different fields like planning, research, production, and post-production. From these activities, we have over 20 hours of interview with pioneers inhabitants from the areas, and it was all made available for the public. Additionally, we have episodes telling the neighborhood history and how residents have leisure, and the last one we fed with data from the social cartography. The project created 200 boxes containing the 7 episodes plus a district map with the residents from the social cartography and the t-shirt. Our second output was the second social cartography of the Terrafilm district. It came up to get material for the audiovisual productions, and it was produced with a different team, relying on 2 geographers and some media students to compile the data and produce content. During the mapping, we noticed that streets were missing in the municipality database and Google Maps. Most road cuts used by inhabitants to configure a different kind of street inaccessible for cars were missing in all databases. Notes here in the red circle, the small street is designed during the social cartography in OpenStreetMaps, and how the same area are represented in the Google Maps that we have in the picture above. Overall, the social cartography used 7 categories to analyze the neighborhood: religion, community organization, education, trade, culture, services, leisure, and health. It resulted in many inclusions to maps and databases such as 790 stores, 30 cultural companies, and 123 religious houses, only to mention a few. Highlighted as the first outcome, increase the visibility of low-income and excluded groups, it's possible to see that there is an increase of followers and the reach of publications. The number of followers on the Terrafilm Firme page rose from 7,000 in 2018 to over 13,000 in 2020. 10 posts have reached more than 21,000 people, and in the case of one publication, it has reached over 200,000 people. The rising number increased the community visibility and started a shift in how media frames the neighborhood. For example, the leading media company in Tao produced a special report for television newspaper showing the community youth entrance in our university programs. Also, the release of the social cartography got much attention in newspapers, broadcasting, and radio, and the state government made a partnership with the civic media movements to engage people from other outskirts on their social programs. Well, in conclusion, I'd like to say that the circumstances we found in similar to many areas in other countries abroad, like in Latin America or in Africa. And the Terrafilm project shows that informal but interconnected communities can promote a change in their way of life and our academic practice. We can make a difference in their lives. We can change the reality we have around us.